What's up everyone, my name is Andy and welcome to Drive Steady. The Shelby GT500 performance stats have pretty much been released at this point, so in this video we're going to compare the performance related metrics of the Shelby GT500 and the Shelby GT350R. We'll look at things like horsepower, torque, acceleration, and even track times. So stick around and let's talk about these two amazing Shelbys. First, thank you to all who watch our videos and subscribe to our channel. If this is your first time stopping by, please consider subscribing so you can stay up to date with all of our content. So the GT350R and the GT500. I believe this is the first time in the GT350 and GT500's history that these cars have been sold side by side. Both have extremely lavish histories in the Ford lineup, which we're not really going to get into for this video, but the Shelby GT350R and the GT500 are both better than they have ever been. Alright, so now let's jump right into the comparison by looking at the engine statistics. The GT350R and the GT500 have two fundamental differences between their otherwise pretty similar engines. Those two differences are that the GT350R has a flat plane crank engine and the GT500 has a cross plane crank engine. The other is that the GT350R is a naturally aspirated engine and the GT500 is supercharged. Essentially, it has forced induction. Now, both the GT350R and the GT500 use the same 5.2 liter 32 valve double overhead cam V8. So much so that in 2019, Ford started using the same block from the GT500 in the GT350. Now let's look at the horsepower, torque, and the Redline numbers. The Shelby GT350R, codenamed Voodoo, has 526 horsepower and 429 foot-pounds of torque with a screaming 8,250 RPM Redline. On the other hand, the Shelby GT500 engine, codenamed Predator, has a monstrous 760 horsepower and 625 foot-pounds of torque with an impressive 7,500 RPM Redline. The difference between these two engines is 234 horsepower and 196 foot-pounds of torque in the favor of the GT500 versus the GT350R. On the flip side, the Redline in the GT350R has 700 more RPM to play with versus the GT500. Not surprised here, the GT500 with its supercharger is hammering down a lot of horsepower and torque, but the high revving nature of the flat plane crank engine in the GT350R revs a little bit higher. One thing I was really impressed with the GT500 is that it revs to 7,500 RPM. Typically, forced induction engines don't rev that high, but the GT500 does, which makes the Predator engine that much more special. Now let's look at acceleration. The Shelby GT350R races to 60 in 3.9 seconds and the GT500 gets there in 3.3 seconds. There's a 0.6 difference between the GT350R and the GT500. Again, not surprised by these numbers because of two things specifically. First, and probably most obviously, the extra power in the GT500. And second, the double clutch transmission. The fact that the GT500 is able to click off shifts within milliseconds gives it a humongous advantage over the manually shifted GT350R. The GT500 has been getting rave reviews about its double clutch transmission, people talking about how instant it shifts and how quickly it responds. One of the reasons why the DCT in the GT500 is so responsive is because Ford decided to hardwire the paddles to the transmission. So kudos to Ford for building a good automated transmission because they're really hard to do, especially the first time around. Okay, next let's look at the curb weight of the Shelby GT350R and the GT500. Unfortunately, Ford doesn't list the curb weights of the GT350R and the GT500, so I had to go digging around and what I found was 3,703 pounds in the 2020 GT350R, and the GT500 without the carbon fiber track package came in at 4,149 pounds, and just for kicks, 4,054 pounds with the track package. Now, all three of these numbers are from Motor Trend, and I know there are different numbers published out there, but this is what I'm going to roll with for this video. Two interesting points here. One, in the GT350R, the numbers I saw in the 2020 model was a little heavier versus any other model year. I'm not sure how much of that is contributed by the new interior, the technology, and also the block from the GT500. But if you happen to know, send us a comment down below. The other is the weight of the GT500. Prior to Motor Trend getting their hands on the GT500, there were talks about it weighing more than 4,200 pounds. It's great that the real world number is less than that, and even though the GT500 is still a heavy car at about 4,000 pounds, it's better than it was expected to be. One other thing I'm surprised to see is that the carbon fiber track package is almost 100 pounds less than the non-track package car. That's more than the difference between the GT350 and the R version, which I believe is about 60 or 70 pounds. So again, the GT500 is impressive here. Next, let's look at often overlooked metrics, power to weight ratio, and the inverse, weight to power. In the GT350R, you take 526 horsepower and divide it by 3,703 pounds, and you get 1.42. For the GT500 without the track pack, the power to weight ratio comes in at 1.83 and 1.87 with the track pack. So in the power to weight ratio chart, the higher the number, the better. So you can see that the GT500 has a better power to weight ratio versus the GT350R, even in the non-track mode trim. The high horsepower in the GT500 is really helping it to come out on top here. Next, let's look at the inverse weight to power ratio. For the Shelby GT350R, you take the weight and divide it by the horsepower and you get 7.03. In the GT500 without the track package, you get 5.45, and with the track package, you get a eye-popping 5.33. The GT500 numbers are truly amazing in these two metrics. The next statistic will be horsepower per dollar, and this one is easy to predict, but there are some interesting things to point out here. So starting off with the GT350R, it costs $141.69 for that 5.2 liter Voodoo engine to develop 1 horsepower. In the Shelby GT500 without the track package, it's $97.36 and $121.70 with the track package, because remember, the track package costs an extra $18,500. As you can see, the cheapest way to get horsepower is to get the non-track package GT500, as it has a difference of almost $45 per horsepower versus the GT350R and $25 against the track package GT500. Now, the interesting point is the difference between the GT350R and the GT500 with the track package. It's roughly $20, which is not that big of a difference, and that's contributed by the $18,500 track package in the GT500 and the price bump the GT350R received for the 2020 model year. Next, let's talk about the transmissions in the Shelby GT350R and the GT500. As I mentioned earlier, the GT350R has a 6-speed manual transmission, and the GT500 has the brand new 7-speed double clutch transmission. But now let's look at this a little deeper and take a look at how much these transmissions actually weigh. The GT350R transmission, which is the Tremec TR3160, comes in at 121 pounds, and the DCT in the GT500 comes in at 229 pounds, for a difference of 108 pounds between these two transmissions. So remember that 351 pound curb weight difference between the GT350R and the GT500? Well, 30% of that weight difference is contributed by the transmission alone. So one thing I believe that's going to happen is that the GT500 is going to get a manual transmission sometime during its life cycle. The reason why I think that is because I believe the GT350 will stop production soon, and to fill that void, Ford will put a manual in the GT500, which will be extremely interesting considering the weight difference between the transmissions. Next, let's look at the quarter mile times. The GT350R blasts through the quarter mile in 12.1 seconds at 119 miles per hour, which is pretty impressive for a car that's not really focused on the quarter mile. But on the flip side, the GT500 just blasts through it, coming in at 10.7 seconds at 130 miles per hour. So there's almost a 1.5 second and 10 mile per hour difference here in this category, and again, this is probably contributed by the extra power and the double clutch transmission in the GT500. So here's an interesting and somewhat controversial topic, and that's top speed. The GT350R has a top speed of 171 miles per hour, and the GT500 is pegged at 180. Now the interesting item here is that both of these cars are somewhat limited by the downforce that they generate, and also the GT500 is electronically limited by Ford to 180. Some out there were scratching their heads when this announcement about the 180 mph top speed limit in the GT500 was made, as to why would Ford limit a car with 760 horsepower to only 180 mph. But my opinion of it is that I'm okay with it, and I believe top speed isn't as important as it used to be. Now on another interesting topic, the price of these two cars. The Shelby GT350R got a price hike in 2020 to the tune of $5,000, which I never really understood, but hey, whatever. So the GT350R now starts at $74,530, which includes destination and handling, and the GT500 without the track package comes in at $73,995, which includes the same $1,095 destination and handling fee, but has an additional $2,600 gas guzzler tax. Just for kicks, I threw in the GT500 with a track package in the chart, and it costs $92,495. Alright, so the difference between the Shelby GT350R and the standard GT500 is a measly $535. The interesting item here is that the GT500 is newer, it has more power, it has more technology, and it still costs less than the older GT350R. Someone might be asking, well, why that is? Well, one of the reasons, in my opinion, is because the GT350R is a lower production and more exclusive car. Because of that, I think Ford has somehow justified that it's more expensive. Now I'm going to make a prediction here, and that is that Ford is going to raise the price of the GT500 in the upcoming years to be above the GT350R. That is, if the GT350R is still in production by then. This price difference is definitely a head scratcher, and another reason why I think the GT350 will not be in production for much longer. At least the GT350R won't be. Okay, so I typically don't compare lap times because there are so many different variables when you're comparing them. Things such as the driver, the weather, the surface, the tires, was the wind blowing east or west, was the sky blue, etc, etc. But I was able to find something close. So Motor Trend took a GT350R back sometime in 2017 to Chuckwalla Raceway, and recently they took a GT500 to the same track. So the track is the same. Now, what about the driver? Well, both cars were driven by Randy Pobst, so the drivers are the same. The only difference between these track times would be the environment, since they're done on different days, but we'll just have to make do with that. So let's look at these numbers. The Shelby GT350R clocked a 1 minute 57.9 second lap. The GT500 without the track package came in at 1 minute 57.7 seconds. And finally, the GT500 with the track pack, 1 minute 56.3 seconds. So let's analyze this chart for a second. So the GT500 without the track package is the slowest in the group, even though it's not even a second slower, 0.8 seconds slower than the GT350R. Now, looking at the difference between the GT350R and the GT500 track package, the difference is almost a second and a half, and when you ask guys who go to the track, 1.5 seconds advantage is amazing. Now, the more interesting thing for me is the difference between the GT500 track pack versus the non-track package car. 2.5 seconds. That's huge. And it's amazing what a difference the track package makes for the GT500. I suppose that's why it's priced at $18,500. Branching off of lap times, let's compare 60 to 0 braking distances. So again, going to Motor Trend articles for all three of these numbers, the GT350R stops from 60 in 99 feet, the GT500 without the track package in 100 feet, and the GT500 with the carbon fiber track package in 94 feet. One point I want to make here on the GT350R is that this number is prior to the changes the GT350R got in 2019 and in 2020. If you're not aware of these changes, the GT350R now has smooth surface rotors compared to slotted it had before, and it also received a lot of the front end suspension componentry from the GT500. Therefore, I'm not sure if this 99 feet number will be improved for the 2020 model, but I wasn't able to find anything about it online. So if you happen to have any insight on the 2020 model, please chime in the comments below. But from the chart, you can see that the braking distance ranking follows the same as the track times, the GT500 non-track pack, then very close behind the GT350R, and the best braking car is the GT500 with the track package. Again, the track package on the GT500 continues to show why it costs what it does. So that's the end of the comparison. That's pretty much all I'm going to look at. Now I just want to wrap it up with a final thought. The GT350R and the GT500 are amazing performers, but in my opinion, appeal in different ways. The high revving nature of the GT350R paired to a manual 6-speed transmission pumping out the intoxicating noise from the flat plane crank engine through that exhaust is just something to behold. The GT500 on the other end is just a monster of a car and should be considered a sports car now, with blistering performance that rivals many supercars and also offers a lot of daily drivability due to magnetic ride shocks. I would have the hardest time trying to pick between these two cars, but I'm glad I don't have to because I've already got a GT350. Which one would you pick? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up and to check out our channel page for more car related videos like this one. Thanks for watching. Until next time, drive steady.